Hello and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. This is the next chapter in Magic of Moonlight, chapter 20, Unlocking. Now you may hear noise in the background. I do have The Sims running in front of me. Yeah, you may hear occasional noise, but what you do? Alright. So, Chapter 20, Unlocking. The next day, Sebastian sat with his head resting in his hand. The four alphas, Beta Daniel, Tiberius and himself have been in talks about how to deal with Chelsea, as she continued to be adamant that she was pregnant. She kicked up a fuss when any medical staff tried to examine her. She also looked like she was having symptoms of pregnancy. Setting aside her claim that it was me who got her pregnant, Sebastian said with a sigh, he felt tired at everyone going in circles about how to deal with the situation, and he just wanted it to all go away already. He decided to start asking very blunt questions. Since that is not the only conclusion, is it possible that she's pregnant to another wolf? It's possible, but without a test to find out, then we won't know, Alpha Marcus replied tiredly. I know you can't sire any pups, but she's going to scream that you are the father. So unless we want to reveal who you are before you fly up to the palace with Tiberius, we need to come up with a plan. What about Ember's magic? Alpha Lucas looked at Sebastian and Tiberius, asking. I know the time avatars wouldn't have compulsion and telekinetic powers, but what about Ember? The extent of the powers the Avatar of the Moon possesses would only be known by the two of you. Sebastian shook his head, confused. Tiberius coughed and turned bright red. Ember's full potential hasn't been unlocked yet. There is one more thing that Sebastian and I need to do before they will be. He paused before stumbling over his words. Or, well, Griffin and Eagle, I mean. He shook his head. Anyway, Ember currently has her support magic and elemental magic at her disposal. She gets psychic magic after the thing is done. His vagueness was not unnoticed. Then perhaps your wolves need to do this thing so that we have her psychic magic to force Chelsea to comply with being tested. Alpha Arazel barked. Last thing we want to do is sentence an innocent to death. Chelsea is by no means innocent, but if she has a pup in her belly... So are you suggesting we keep her until she gives birth before we execute her? Alpha Alexis asked. I'm not comfortable with that idea. The pup would end up being an orphan. That's why the tests, Alpha Arazel replied quietly. Find out who the father is and see if they want to care for the pup. If not, then the pup is not viable on its own. Wait. Sebastian's eyes glazed over as he mind-linked Ember. My love, with Chelsea. There's no pup, Sebastian, Ember replied bluntly. She had been increasingly irritable with Chelsea being alive. She had the urge to go down and kill Chelsea herself for touching her maid. Toby says there is no pup. She's trying to buy more time. All you're doing is allowing her more time. Sebastian shivered involuntarily at her tone. I'm not happy, darling. She touched you while pretending to be me, and she's now claiming you got her pregnant. I don't care what you do. She has to be gone. He felt their mind link slam shut and vibrate, like as if she had physically slammed a door shut in front of him. Ah. Sebastian's voice trembled. I forgot how fiery Ember's anger can be. She said that there is no pup. Toby told her that there was no pup, and that she was trying to buy time, and we're allowing it by discussing it. Alpha Marcus also gave an involuntary shiver. Then it's settled. Griffin and Eagle do what they need to do to unlock the remainder of Ember's magic. We will force her to test as proof that we are not executing an innocent to the rest of the wolves without exposing your identity, and then Ember can execute her. That will probably appease her anger the best. Everyone nodded their agreement to this plan. Tiberius tapped Sebastian's arm and indicated for him to follow. If you excuse us, we will get right to it. They both left the room, and Sebastian guided them to where Ember was with the other avatars. Along the way, Tiberius cleared his throat, and a light blush graced his cheeks. Just tell me, Sebastian said with a sigh. I assume because it's both Eagle and Griffin that it involves Glacier as well. You know how Eagle is also Glacier's mate? Tiberius said slowly. Well, we are rarely all together. The moon goddess allowed that Glacier's full potential could only be unlocked by... well... He looked uncomfortable at Sebastian. I found this to be a little difficult when it was me in your position, and Saburo having Griffin as his wolf. Ebony, to her credit, understood and let it happen for Glacier's sake. Sebastian finally understood what Tiberius was trying to say. I'm not happy, but also okay with this, he said, finally, after some time. You yourself aren't Ember's mate, but your wolf Eagle is Glacier's. He smiled lightly. It also helps that you look like you're in your mid-20s and not an old dude. Tiberius laughed loudly at that, breaking the awkwardness between them. The moon goddess worked out that it was more acceptable to have the full court to stop aging physically around our mid-20s. The first 3 kings were a mix of trial and error. His laughter died down. I'm suspecting that Ember is probably aware that we're waiting for us to initiate this. I agree, Sebastian replied with a smile. She knows a lot more than she lets on. Even earlier when I mind-link her, she knew exactly what I was going to ask before I got a chance to ask it. Get used to it, Tiberius chuckled lightly. Ebony was the same. Sometimes all I had to do is enter a room and she knew exactly what I needed or what I was going to say. They entered the room and found Ember staring right at them. It became more prominent after our wolves linked with Saburo's, and when she became more attuned to the palace. Ember closed the book she was reading and approached them. Her eyes were narrowed, but also held some amusement. So the situation with Chelsea has been delayed. She looked at them, studying their faces. Oh! Her eyes widened in surprise. Glacier's been looking forward to this day. She could feel her wolf jumping around and purring incessantly, trying to attract the attention of Eagle and Griffin. Good thing your bedroom is soundproof, Sebastian. Both wolves blushed. Shall we? Sebastian asked, offering her an arm. Some fun before the day is over. Fun indeed, she replied, linking her arm with his. She nodded at Tiberius before the three set off to Sebastian's room. Glacier is looking forward to lots of fun. They walked up the stairs to Sebastian's room and locked the door behind them. Ember leaned against the door, closing her eyes. Both could feel the shift in her energy. She opened her eyes, revealing silver irises, before a smile began to form on her face. "Griffin," Glacier purred as she called out to her mates. "Eagle." Sebastian and Tiberius were both taken aback by how much longing Glacier had in her voice. "I can see your humans. Where are you?" Her purr took on a sad note. "You don't want to play with me?" Griffin was first to break through. "Always, my love." He pinned part of her tightly to the door. "No need to be sad. We want to play too," he growled in her ear. Eagle was not far behind Griffin. The pair had pinned her completely. Each had one of her legs trapped between their own. "Be ready, beloved. We are going to devour you so thoroughly your human won't be able to walk anymore." Alright, I will skip a whole heap, because there's quite a scene between Griffin, Eagle, and Glacier. Ember awoke the next morning. Her body felt sore and drained. She could feel she was sandwiched between Tiberius and Sebastian. "Glacier, about my question last night. You can't feel sparks from Tiberius because he isn't your mate." Glacier's voice was tired but extremely happy. "I felt them last night because Eagle is my mate." Ember paused, thinking for a while before asking, "Do you want this more often?" Glacier's silence worried her. "Be with Griffin and Eagle, I mean." "Tiberius will only be alive for another 2 more months. You won't get to see Eagle again for a long time after that." "You're okay with that?" Glacier asked curiously. "I would love to be with my mates more if you're okay with it." "I'd have to talk to Sebastian and Tiberius about it first, but I'm okay with it." Ember could feel a hand gently move and come to rest on her waist. The sparks told her it was Sebastian's hand. Another hand gently raised to rest on her shoulder. She could tell this was Tiberius. She looked up and back towards him. Tiberius chuckled lightly and slid out from under her. "Eagle told me what you said to Glacier." He gave her a light kiss on the cheek. "As long as Sebastian and you are okay with it, then I am too. Our wolves go through long stretches of time without the 3 of them being together. We, as their humans, can honor their sacrifice for werewolves as a whole by allowing them to be together." "I agree as well." Sebastian's voice was muffled due to how deeply he was snuggled into her. Griffin feels so excited to spend more time with both Eagle and Glacier. He lifted his head up and planted a little kiss on Ember's lips. "Not too often, though. I can feel how sore you are with each movement, my love." Ember gave him a cheeky smile in response. "You should be able to feel a lot more now, darling. After I felt that shatter of the last barrier, my sense of you has increased exponentially." She paused before adding, Your instinct is telling you to reclaim your mate. She looked up at Tiberius, who had just finished getting dressed. If I were you, I'd escape before Sebastian started devouring me. Tiberius laughed and disappeared out the door. Sebastian growled lightly and moved, pinning her under him once more. Ember gave him a kiss on his neck and squealed as she was swept away once again. The next day, Sebastian sat talking to the Alphas about Chelsea and the other future plans. Ember sat sleepily in his lap and periodically yawned loudly. The Alphas had brought their betas and gammas along for the meeting today. This annoyed Ember a lot, and she made her feelings very clear to Sebastian through their mind link. It always amazed him how she could easily look very tired and sleepy on the outside, but be almost spewing fire at him in anger on the inside. While none of the Alphas minded her presence, the beaters of Poison Fang both stared at her seemingly disrespectful presentation with disdain. Neither wished to publicly insult Sebastian or her due to the power that the Shadowrunners pack held as a whole. They also knew that Alpha Lucas would skin them alive for saying something with so many present. When everyone broke for lunch, they quietly pulled Sebastian aside to speak to him. "You need to control your mate better," Beta Justin hissed at him quietly. "For your mate to show such disrespect to the Alphas is appalling. I thought your father raised you better than this." And Sebastian gave them a wry smile before asking, "Who says they were disrespected by Ember?" His eyes were sharp, but also held some fondness when mentioning her. They were actually honoured that she was present at the meeting. Perhaps your brain cannot understand why. "Your Majesty!" Beta Caitlin said in indignation, before suddenly clapping her hand over her mouth. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at the young wolf before her. You can't be. You..." she spluttered, unable to keep control of her words. Beta Justin looked back and forth between Sebastian and Caitlin, before saying in a low voice, they weren't insulted or felt disrespected because they knew she's the Avatar. He smiled lightly. Ember Neal used to also be very sleepy first thing in the morning, and often the old king would use that to test the reaction of wolves in court. Sebastian chuckled lightly. "Not my intention, but I can see the benefits of it." He gave them a nod before adding, "Majority of the betas and gammas from the 4 packs don't know who Ember and myself are. Only our beta and gamma, as well as the betas of Dark Moon pack, know. The intention is that they will be invited to the coronation and find out then." "We won't say anything," Beta Caitlin replied softly. She was still feeling embarrassed that she tried to reprimand the king and his mate. "I can understand now why the Alpha said nothing." She paused, then added, "Ember may have a more difficult time with our Gamma. Gamma Oliver and his mate Juliet were adamant that they were going to knock some sense into her." And Sebastian laughed out loud. "If they try to touch Ember, they will get thrown. My shield won't allow anyone to harm her." As if he had spoken a prediction, a scream rippled through the air. All 3 looked at each other and ran towards the source of the noise. Sebastian wasn't too worried, as he knew the scream was not from Ember. They stopped just short of where Ember and the Gammas were. Both beaters stared, amazed and incredulously, as the situation unfolded before them. They knew Gamma Juliet insisted on she-wolves being prim and proper ladies. They also now understood that Ember wouldn't be one to roll over and show her belly for anyone other than her mate. They could see Ember standing with her arms folded, staring at the pair of Gammas, who were now picking themselves off the floor. Ember cocked her head to one side and said, "Looks like my mate doesn't like how you just spoke to me." "How would you know that?" Gamma Juliet spat. "He's not here." "My mate gave me this shield," Ember replied calmly. Gamma Juliet and Oliver growled, irritable that Ember was not even calling Sebastian by his name. "My bond with him allows me to be protected from anyone who wishes to physically harm me. You must have had intentions to do physical harm in order for it to activate." "Insolent bitch!" Gamma Oliver yelled before punching the shield. "His Majesty would—" His words caught in his throat. His Majesty. He stared at Ember, who revealed her crescent moon to him. "What the fuck are you doing, Oliver?" Gamma Juliet screamed angrily. "What does the king have to do with this insolent bitch?" Sebastian sighed and walked closer. As he approached, Gamma Oliver knelt down and dragged his mate down with him. She screamed and protested the whole way. Shaking his head, Sebastian raised his hand and let the shield disappear. "Perhaps you should try listening to what your mate just said, rather than trying to attack my mate again, Juliet," he said calmly to her. Gamma Juliet glared at him. "How dare you not use my title? I'm higher status than you. You're only a future perspective, whereas I am actual." Ember sighed and snapped her fingers, effectively causing Gamma Juliet to become mute. The latter scratched at her throat in vain before glaring angrily at Ember, her lips moving as if to demand the mute be removed from her. "It seems that it is your mate who needs discipline," Sebastian said calmly. "Not mine." He placed a kiss on the side of Ember's head before continuing. "If your mate cannot pull herself together and learn humility, then I'm afraid I cannot allow her at the coronation in a month's time." "I understand, Your Majesty," Gamma Oliver replied with his head bowed. He felt his mate stop struggling beside him. "Sebastian is the future king, sweetheart," he said to her through their mind link. "You've just tried to attack the Avatar of the Moon. Please stop making more of a scene. We've already embarrassed ourselves enough as it is." What? Gamma Juliet looked up at Ember. She could see the crescent moon on her chest, just hiding under her neckline. "Ebony. That's why the Alpha said nothing. That's why they didn't care how much she yawned. They know!" Ember leaned forward and stared into Gamma Juliet's eyes before snapping her fingers again. "You understand now? Please don't overstep your Alpha in the future. If your Alpha doesn't react, then neither should you. It is not your duty to reprimand others in your Alpha's stead. Your Alpha is perfectly capable of doing that himself." "I understand, Avatar," Gamma Juliet replied softly. She felt thoroughly humiliated, and could not find anyone but herself to blame for the incident she had created. Ember was right. If the Alphas found something disrespectful, or intolerable, then they would have said something to that wolf, and it was not her place to say it for them. Sebastian swept Ember up into his arms and took her inside without saying anything more to them. He nuzzled her neck, causing her to giggle at the sensation. "My little mate," he cooed softly before planting a kiss on her neck. "I wonder if the other betas and gammas will come to try and reprimand you." "I'd like to see them try," she whispered, and nipped his chin with her lips before placing a tiny kiss. Should we just ask the alphas to let their ranked wolves know? Maybe easier that way." Sebastian nodded. "Probably. As much as we need to hide who I am so I'm not waylaid by multiple petitioners, we also need to make sure that our hand isn't forced to reveal." They both nodded in agreement before Sebastian tapped into the mind link to let the alphas know of their decision. And that's it. Yeah. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let me know what games you want me to play, what stories you want me to update. At the moment I'm updating mostly Magic of Moonlight. I haven't worked out which fan fiction I want to update. But I'll work something out at some point. Yeah. But yeah. And remember, let your imagination run wild. Bye for now.